opposition side, we have Team iPod. My name is Kim Chan-gun, and I'll be chairing this debate today. With me, I have 6 fellow judges. They are Kang Seok-jun, Lee Young-cho, Seomin-gun, Lee Seung-hun, Kim Chan, and Chung Jae-dong. The judge, Seomin-gun, will also be timekeeping for us. At a minute, he'll clap once. At 7 minutes, he'll clap once more. At 8, he'll clap twice. And starting from 8 minutes 30 seconds, he will continue on clapping until the debater stops speaking. So without further ado, I'd like to begin the debate under the motion, this House believes that the Arab League should not comment on the pursuit of democracy in the Middle East. I would like to call up the Prime Minister from Team SM1 to begin this debate.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a Prime Minister of government side, I will follow this. First, I will define some key terms to help understand better. And second, I will talk about status quo. And third, I will move on my own argument. Let's move on the first step, define some key terms. Our government side define the comment as positive, not only positive, but also the negative comment. It means we define as comment, positive, negative comments. And let's move on this status quo. Do you know why they made the Arab League? Because their purpose of made Arab League is the economic. And they have the various politics system. So and they have various politics system. Their nation have politics. Their nation have various political nation. So they don't have any right to intervention at the politics system. And when they have any right to intervention at the political system. And I will move on our own argument. Our team has 3 arguments. The first argument will take by myself, and second and third argument take by my Deputy Prime Minister. And let's move on the first step. First argument, the harm of comments. As I mentioned at this status quo, the Arab League's purpose is the economic problem, and they have any right to comment about the politics system. And when the comment is allowed, whether it is the positive or negative, and at the Arab, it means at the Arab they will break the obstruction, and because the various political system have many at the various political system they exist a lot of many company, but if we allow the comment of Arab League, then at the Arab League they have fight each other inside of the Arab League. But if the inside of Arab League they have destruction, and it can also affect the Arab League, and it can also destroy the Arab League. And long time see it can affect also the relationship between economic, and it can also break the relationship between economic in Arab League. And also the
Yes, sir.
no sir. And also the oil protect the if they destruct the oil protect, and not a Middle East nation, and not Middle East Asian have intervention at the Arab League. And I will sum up what I'm talking about. The Arab League purpose is only the economic purpose, and our governments I strongly believe that they don't have any. No, sir. And our government side strongly believe that they don't have any right to intervention at the political system. And when we allow that intervention in the political system, it has a lot of harm to Arab League and it has a lot of harm to economic problem. Because,
answer.
no sir, because if we allow the comment, then we have destruction inside of the Arab League, and it also has break the relationship, economic relationship, and it can also break the oil protect system, and the other nation can intervention at the Arab League. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The speaker spoke for 4 minutes, 24 seconds. Could the leader of opposition from Team iPod come up to start his team's case?
Okay. May I start? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Arab League we are talking about today in this debate. It isn't the Asian League, the American League, and the European League, but it is the Arab League, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe that it itself is very important and gives the Arab League responsibility to comment on the recent pursuit of democracy. Now, before I go on to talk about our stance and our arguments, I'd like to first rebut the points made by our Prime Minister. Now, the Prime Minister's point can be divided into two things. The first point is about how the Arab League is only allowed to comment on economic problems. And his second point was about if the Arab League comments on political systems, the Arab League will suddenly fight each other. Now, the first point, their point is that the Arab League is only supposed to comment on economic problems. But our side, ladies and gentlemen, will further elaborate in my arguments that why, because it is the Arab League, and because it is the Arab League, it has the purpose and it should comment on the recent pursuit of democracy. And to his second point, now, we believe that his second point is made up of assumptions. Now, he just said that if the Arab League comments on politics, the Arab League will suddenly dismantle itself and the member states will suddenly fight each other. Now, we believe that that is a grand assumption, and he did not provide sufficient evidence and reasoning to support his stance. Now, to go on with our case. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposition bench's stance is that the Arab League has both the justification and responsibility to comment on the recent pursuit of democracy. We have 4 arguments to support our case. First, the Arab League's regional specialty. Second, it is a win-win situation for the Arab countries and the international society. Third, dependency on outsiders has been historically harmful. And lastly, the Arab League commenting itself is a meaningful thing in today's status quo. Now, as the leader of opposition, I will talk about the first 2 arguments of our case, while our honorable deputy leader of opposition will talk about the last 2 arguments. Now, to go on with the first argument. Ladies and gentlemen, the Arab League is a regional organization in the Arab region. We understand and accept that the Arab League wasn't formed necessarily for humanitarian purposes and to pursue universal values shared by humanity.
Sir?
But ladies and gentlemen, no thank you, sir. But ladies and gentlemen, consider these 2 points. First, the Arab League is the only organization that has jurisdiction over the Arab area. It is like the only representative organization of the Arab region that cares for only the Arab member states.
Sir.
Just like the European Union. No thank you, sir. And second, the Arab League is the organization that knows the most about its member states in the Arab region and the volatile Arab region. So these 2 facts lead us to conclude that when global organizations that pursue humanitarian values, such as the UN, believe that international intervention is necessary to stop, say, human rights infringement that is blatantly occurring in the Arab region, the UN has no choice but to cooperate with the Arab League and rely on their knowledge in the region. Now,
Sir.
this implies a very significant meaning. No, thank you. This implies a very significant meaning. From the moment the Arab League starts to work with the UN or any other international organization that finds problems in the Arab states, it is taking on international responsibility. By international responsibility, we mean that they are no longer a regional organization that only cares for its member states and their interests, but they have become an organization that should be pursuing humanitarian values that is shared globally, such as human rights. So the bottom line is, because of their regional specialty and their unique knowledge of the region, international organizations would have to work together with the Arab League to intervene in the situation of the Arab region. And like it or not, this entails a lot of international responsibilities for the Arab League. Responsibilities that require the Arab League to step up from being a regional organization to an organization that pursues internationally shared values. And we believe commenting on the issue of democracy and the Arab Spring is in compliance with these newfound responsibilities. Human rights have been blatantly infringed upon for decades through dictatorships, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe when finally these dictatorships are seemingly coming to a halt, it is the duty of the Arab League to protect the human rights of citizens of the Arab League and support the movement against dictatorships due to the Arab League's newfound responsibilities. Therefore, the Arab League should comment. To our second argument, ladies and gentlemen, let's say that the Arab League lets go of the situation and does not comment. What will happen? The situation will exacerbate to an extent where other neighbors around the region are starting to become uncomfortable because the fire is about to reach them. And then the UN and other international organizations will have to intervene to resolve the social unrest. And then the countries in the Arab League would not like it, because if international organizations intervene into the situation, they feel that their independence and their sovereignty is being infringed upon. So we believe, ladies and gentlemen, that if the Arab League comments on the pursuit of democracy, we think it is creating a win-win situation for both the member states of the Arab League and the international society. Why? Because the Arab League commenting on the situation means that they are trying to solve the problem internally without having the problem to extend the problem outside of the Arab world. This is good for the international society because obviously this means that the international society as a whole will not be disturbed by the volatile region, since the problem will be handled internally, and the neighboring countries can breathe a sigh of relief to some extent. This is also good for the rest of the Arab countries, since international intervention into the situation will be minimized and lessening the feelings of infringement of their rights. And we believe, as the opposition, that this is a win-win situation that we should be pursuing in today's debate. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've told you how the Arab League should, like it or not, take an international responsibility regardless of its former characteristics, and how it is good for both the member states and international society. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like all of you to know that today, in this debate, the opposition side are extremely proud to say that we should be commenting on the motion. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes, 37 seconds. I would now like to call upon the second speaker from side government, the Deputy Prime Minister.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ma'am and Mr. Speaker, in today's debate, the government have provided to you the reason why the government has a responsibility to not to Arab League, not to make a comment on pursuit of the democratic society. And in my speech as a Deputy Prime Minister, I'll mainly do three things. First, I'll go over the opposition's case. We'll give you a rebuttal. Secondly, I'll explain to you our two arguments for the benefit of the South. Lastly, we'll give you two questions in today's debate. So let's go for the first step about the rebuttal. Firstly, I have three rebuttal. Well, a leader of opposition came up to this podium and mentioned about the AL's responsibility and some kinds of United Nations intervention and the humanitarian issue. Well, those three things are factually untrue. And now in my rebuttal, I'll explain this. First, I quote the leader of opposition. They said AL has a responsibility because it has originality. First, the reason why Arab League have been created in the past is pursuitness of its own benefit. They are proposed to earn their own economic regarding about the oil, coal, or some kinds of natural resources, so they can gain their own profit. Indeed, thus we believe they don't have a responsibility and impractical to insist that this is practical. Secondly, they have mentioned about the humanitarian issue. Firstly, in Arab League, we have 22 countries whose ideology is different. Some of them are democracy, some of them are capitalism, some of them are some country who is dictator, who has a great dictator. Well, upon that note, I would like to explain you why this is irrational. By having a comment from the Arab League, we can clearly see that if the representative of the Arab League came up to this podium and explained, okay, we pursue the democracy or we don't pursue the democracy, then the country who's involved in Arab League can be messed up because their representative just messed up their own ideology and refused their own ideology, which means it is harmful for the Arab League firstly, and secondly, it cannot solve this problem. That's the reason we think the second rebuttal clearly shows that governments are rational, why their first model and second argument fails. Lastly, I would like to give you the reason why the United Nations and other organizations is really practical and why their argument, the second argument about the United Nations has no responsibility to take care of the Arab situation. Well, firstly, the main purpose of the United Nations is to support a country who is pursuing for democratic society. That's the reason why United Nations cares for every single nation, and that's the reason why most of the democratic society, most democratic country is involved in United Nations. That's the reason why they are sending their soldiers to Syria, some kinds of protest to Syria, and those kinds of countries who pursue for democratic society. Second, United has a duty, and third, they have solved a lot of problems. That's the reason why we cannot agree Arab League to comment, and that's the reason why we believe United Nations is more value and still valid. That was my rebuttal, and they have to explain us why this three rebuttal is rational, but we told you why this fails. Now I'll go into second step about explaining our two arguments. Firstly, I have first arguments labeled as a practicality, and the last argument labeled as why the status quo does not need Arab League. So let's go for our second argument about the practicality. So before moving on to this step, I would like to give you a background of the Arab Spring. Well, our Prime Minister and their leader of opposition both explained about the Arab Spring, and we told you why Arab Spring is valid and why we don't actually need Arab League. Because Arab Spring, about 12 countries have demonstrated for the pursuit of their own democracy. That's the reason why they have labeled this as an Arab Spring. Spring itself means a lot. Spring itself means start. Spring itself means something, it is pursuing for something. And that's the reason why the 12 countries have demonstrated for their own process, their own progress through stepping toward to their own democratic society. Keep that in mind when we just put AL to comment on pursuit of democracy or yes or no. Firstly, it is not practical because as I mentioned in my rebuttal, it has no responsibility because its main object is pursuing their own profit. And even if when they're making those kinds of comments, their representative will think about their own object. Their representative can also think about the side effects. Some kind of their representative can make a comment based on their own profit. That's the reason why we cannot rely on the Arab League. That's the reason why we cannot allow that. Secondly, we have a specialized organization as a United Nations. And except for that, we have a lot of countries who is looking for looking for the Arab countries' pursuit of democracy, and who have a country who can actually give us support to some kinds of
Point,
country
sir.
who is pursuing of their own democracy. That's the reason why we don't need, and we cannot say this is practical. We see and we don't need this because Arab League will bring a great side effects, as I've mentioned in my rebuttal. Secondly, as I've mentioned, there will be a side effect that will mess up, and it can actually give the detrimental effect to their own Arab League itself. And as we've mentioned, we cannot deny the fact that AL is really important. But however, we also have a responsibility to take care of the Arab League because their main purpose is for their profit. That's the reason why they have to focus on their profit rather than bringing other trivial issues and being nitpicky about just making a comment and bringing some kinds of irrational thing. My third argument is the status quo does not need Arab League's action and comment. So as I give you as a background of the Arab Spring, I've told you a lot of things, why it has been labeled as the Arab Spring, and the reason why there is some kinds of Arab Spring and 12 countries who have pursued for their own democratic society. So with having this kinds of positive status quo, we can clearly see that we don't need some kinds of intervention from the Arab League. That's the reason why we cannot agree on this fact. Their second argument also fails by explaining our third argument because they have mentioned some kinds of United Nations or some kinds of trivial issues. But however, we are just telling you why Arab Spring is more having a positive effect, and we don't need some kinds of intervention from the Arab League. That's the reason why we tell you this is valid. So what did I told you in today's debate? I gave you the reason why
On that
they
point,
are
sir.
out of order.
No, it's not out of order.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So are you saying that when UN supports democracy movement, the UN should not be intervening in the Arab Spring?
Pardon?
No, you just said that the UN supports democracy movement. UN supports democracy. But then, so are you saying that the UN should not intervene in the Arab Spring, which also supports democracy?
Well, firstly, I'd like to tell you, Arab Spring itself have been intervened by the United Nations. United Nations military have supported Arab Spring. We are not actually making a contradiction. They have misunderstood our own argument. That's the reason why their rebuttal also fails. So I would like to give you two questions in today's debate. Ladies and gentlemen, which one is more valid? Arab Spring, the status quo itself, or intervention which is irresponsible and does not need it? And secondly, I would like to give you a question, who is more rational? Because Arab League is still making a proposal for their own pursuit. They make a decision on their pursuit of the democracy, but however, they don't have a responsibility. Thus, we cannot say it is rational for them to intervene. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes, 24 seconds. Could the Deputy Leader of Opposition come up to the podium to give his speech?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today, as the second speaker for the opposition side, I'd like to clearly point out why the opposition side should take this debate home. We are proposing that Arab League should comment on democracy, on the pursuit of democracy in the Middle East. And we're providing concrete reasons, and I'll add on to those concrete reasons, why we should comment on democracy in the Middle East. Today, we're seeing a proposition that is being very irresponsible. They're saying that the status quo in the Middle East, when there are civil wars going on, many conflicts going on, which is the Middle East is a region with one of the most conflicts in the entire world, and they're saying that the status quo is fine, and that there is no intervention for outer power. We're seeing a very irresponsible government, ladies and gentlemen, who are avoiding their responsibilities. In contrast to these irresponsible government, we would like to point out the role of an international organization. Ladies and gentlemen, before I go on to my points in the speech, what is an international organization comprised of member states? What does it mean to be the member of an international organization like EU, NATO, ASEAN, or UN? What does it mean? It means that you will receive support and aid from those international organizations that you agree to also support. It's a mutual communication, it's a mutual support between the member states and the government and the organization. What I mean by mutual is that the member states in the organization will support the organization flourish by taking the responsibilities that the organization provides. And in response to those responsibilities fulfilled by the member states, The organizations having these member states as their members will provide support and help to these member states, no matter how much, it doesn't matter how much influence it will have on the real situation. They'll at least take efforts to help these member states solve the conflicts and the situations if it gets severe enough. And we believe that the situation, status quo in the Middle East, is one of the most severe status quos, one of the most severe conflicts going on around the world. Because it is a conflict between ideologies. It is a challenge against the current existing regime. We may not imagine how difficult it is to challenge the current regime because we live in a relatively affluent country with a relatively stable country. However, several decades ago, our own ancestors also had to challenge the regime, the Park Chung-hee regime, against their dictatorship. It caused many people to die. This is one of the severe consequences. This can cause severe consequences. And we believe that the Arab region and the Middle East region is going through the same situation as Korea has gone through several decades ago. And several decades ago, no sir. And several decades ago, when Korea was undergoing such transitions, we received help from foreign countries, and this eventually led to a successful transition to democracy. We believe that since there's the same situation in the Middle East, other outer interference is needed in some sort of way. We're not saying that foreign intervention is needed, but since there exists a formal organization to help the Arab League nations, we believe that the Arab League should be the one who helps the individual nations achieve democracy. Having said this clearly, yes, sir.
As I mentioned in my own speech, I've told you the reason why it is irrational, so you have to explain about this to prove your own argument.
I'm going to say, I was explaining about international organizations, basic responsibilities that it should take, and I'm going to explain why Arab League should be the one who intervenes in this issue. And before I go into elaborating on the third and fourth arguments for the option side, I would first like to make some brief rebuttals to the proposition side flawed arguments. First, about their first argument, they said that Arab League's purpose is purely economical, and if they comment on democracy, they'll just suddenly fight each other and it will lead to destruction of the Arab League and the Arab League nations. They define this as a very groundless assumption because, first of all, their purpose is not purely economical. It says in the Arab League Charter that was formed in 1945 that it will, if conflicts and problems arise in the future, the Arab League nations in this Arab League will cooperate closely on issues like social welfare, politics, economics, and many of those other things. There are 6 things that they agreed to cooperate on. Therefore, we believe that this prerequisite for this argument, first of all, doesn't stand. And also, even if we say that this prerequisite does stand, what is the link between the purpose being economical and commenting on democracy, causing each country in the Arab League to fight each other, eventually leading to destruction? Under their logic, every country in the Arab League or every country in the unstable regions in the world must be fighting with each other every day because the international organizations, international organizations keep commenting on, even taking actions on these issues, but we're not seeing such fights every day that leads to destruction every day. Ladies and gentlemen, under their logic, the NATO's actions, NATO's intervention in the recent revolution in Egypt must have led to fights between the Arab League countries. However, we didn't find that happening. Therefore, we believe that their argument is completely flawed. Their second argument was about the practicality. They said about the Arab Spring and how the Arab League doesn't have the responsibility to be involved in politics because their purpose is to purely pursue profits. However, as I clearly explained, they agreed to closely cooperate on 6 matters, including politics, not only the economics. And they have also explained how the UN is better, but we have found we have no suitable evidence for this because UN, first of all, is an organization comprised of many nations from different continents, from different race, from different culture. Arab League is an organization simply comprised of same race, same cultural, these Arab countries. Therefore, we believe the Arab League has much more knowledge and understanding about the region, so it'll be much more effective, in solving the regional conflicts in this region. And now I'd like to go on to elaborate on the arguments without further ado. Our third argument for the option side is that if the Arab League does not intervene in this issue and just leave it to the countries by itself, it will eventually lead to foreign intervention. Ladies and gentlemen, the situation in Syria, for example, will not get any better if we leave it to themselves. There is no guarantee that it will get better. Then if the situation worsens and worsens, the international organizations like UN and EU, NATO, will once again have the responsibility to be involved and stop the massacre of citizens. Then if foreign intervention happens, I'd like to specifically elaborate on the disadvantages of foreign intervention by explaining the example of Korea. We needed foreign help during the Imperial Japan, before the Imperial Japan, because there were invasions from many other countries, and we called for Japan and China's help to stop those foreign countries from invading our country. It was successful at the moment. We were successful in preventing the other countries' invasions. However, there is no such thing as free in the international society. Everything comes for a cost. And it was the same for this situation in our country too. Eventually, we had to pay a great cost because the Japanese government suddenly now had a justified reason to stay in Korea and to make their military stay in Korea and intervene in Korean politics. Therefore, this eventually led to colonization of Korea, and this caused catastrophic effects on the history of our country. Having said this, I would like to move on to the fourth argument of our side, which is about the significance. We admit that Arab League is full of dictators, and it's hard to say that democracy is prevalent in that region. However, consider the circumstances. Arab League commenting on democracy will have some effect because the act of commenting itself has much significance. It gives a social message to the society that, first of all, Arab League is becoming more open towards democracy. They're not completely excluding democracy and only pursuing dictatorship and communism like North Korea is doing. And second of all, it sends a message to the people that, it is sort of admitting the values of democracy, not only undiscriminatively pursuing dictatorship. Even if the comments may simply be formal and may not have much influence on solving the situations, which we have denied clearly with evidences, the action of commenting itself has much significant meaning on the entire world and for the people in that region. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, for these reasons, we believe that the government is being very irresponsible, denying the fundamental role and purpose of international organizations, and is saying flawed arguments without any evidence. And on the contrast, we have provided you with full evidenced arguments. Therefore, we believe we take the debate. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 8 minutes, 14 seconds. I would now like to call upon the government whip.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, in my speech, I will tell you why our story of destructing in Arab League is not assumption. It is main goal of my speech. Political ideology is very sensitive issue. Many countries with different political system, 22 countries, gathered together and became Arab League. And the main purpose was to protect the oils that those Middle East have and their economy and profits that they could earn by gathering together, ladies and gentlemen. So even though they had different perspective about the political system, they have agreed because of the main issue, which was the economy. And this is, we have to actually emphasize on the points because that they have actually told us that in the 6 promises, there were politics, but for many years, they actually, Arab League did not intervene in any of the political issue. This means that even
On that point, sir.
No, sir. Even if there is a law that allows them to have political issues like talked, they don't want to talk about it because it is very sensitive and they don't want to fight each other and they want to have their profits, ladies and gentlemen.
Precisely, sir.
No, sir. So to go on to the rebuttals, I'll go on to the rebuttals that I found on this debate, then go to the 3 clashes that I found. So to go on to the first rebuttal, they say that Arab League can become an international organization which can help also other nations outside of the Arab League and actually help them, support them to have the democracy, to pursue the democracy. But we think that it is not quite right, as they gave us an assertion that because they have same culture and they have same regional similar things, that's the reason why they're helping each other, is what they have said. And we don't think that it will spread out to other countries, and they don't have benefits that they were gonna earn, and they don't have any benefits, and they don't have to interfere to another political system of different countries outside of the Arab League. So we think that it is very impractical. Like they gave us a lack of possibility that those Arab League will become international organization. And also to the second point, they said that they said about the Korean example, but I didn't actually understand what they were trying to say. But we have mentioned in our speech that we're gonna have as an alternative a UN to provide a support, because we think that it is more practical and it can actually have benefits, because those Arab League with different political system doesn't have to
Point,
fight
sir.
over how they're gonna help or not help those countries in the pursuit of democracy. So to go on to the clash, we have to say, should Arab, we have first clash, should Arab intervene? Do they have a justification? And the government side tells you today that because there are lots of political ideology, they don't actually have a consensus on whether they would try to support them or not. Because there are many dictators and there are also democratic nation. They will fight each other and they will not actually have consensus over will they have to bring armies or will they support the democratic system on
POI, sir.
Yes.
Your side is trying to assume that international relations can be broken very fragilely, because you keep saying that they'll fight, and lead to destruction just because of these minimal effects.
We don't think that it's a minimum effect, because as I've mentioned, political ideology is a very sensitive issue, and international relationship can be also affected by how they disagree on the fact that how they can have conflicts over whether they should help them or not. And even if they help those democratic countries, this fight will be going over and over, because there are still dictating countries who doesn't want to help the support, and we think that this conflict can be detrimental to Arab League, and maybe because they have different political system, we think that there is a clear possibility that those Arab League can be separated into those of democratic system and also the dictators which don't want to have democracy. And this means that the destruction of Arab League can actually break the purpose they wanted to have, because they wanted to protect their oils. They wanted to protect the economy by combining them all together in the Arab. But because of these destructions that happen by those by different political systems that nations have, we believe that there will be many countries who want to have those oil profits, because because Middle East there are many oils and people want
POI,
to
sir.
have oils from different countries. That's why United States has intervened and had the Iraq War, and because these can happen when the destruction happens. And because of this point, we think that there will be many interventions from other foreign countries when the Arab League is destructed. That's what we believe. And because we have also a clash on the point about the efficiency and practicality, because I've shown you that they could not have consensus over whether they should bring the army or not, we think that they would not make a decision whether they can. So their comment is invalid, because the comment will not actually lead to the action, because they don't agree on the fact whether they should try to pursue democracy or not. So this means that they would not take any action from what they are fighting over, and it actually brings harm, because it leads to, as we have mentioned, a destruction of Arab League, and also because it is not practical. We think that it should be a third party like United Nations, which also have a democratic system, and also they have obligation to have armies, and we think that it is more objective for UN to only intervene into the action. And so what we have told you today is that because we know what they are trying to do by having those tribes make a more democratic society, but we have to say that it is impractical in today's debate because the consensus will not, there will be no consensus and there will be only fighting, and it will actually deteriorate the international relationship between the Arab countries. And we believe that because of these harms and nothing that they can earn from what they try to have on the comments, we believe that there is actually detrimental harm but no benefits that they can earn by having those comments. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes 59 seconds. I would now like to call upon the opposition whip to give her speech.
Last page of this pit. 그러니까.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and honorable adjudicators. Good afternoon. Today we're debating on the motion that this House believes that the Arab League should not comment on the pursuit of democracy in the Middle East. And as the opposition whip speaker, I found three clashes in this debate. First, if the Arab League has a responsibility and justification to comment on democratic movements. Second, second on the consequences, whether it has harmful effects or benefits. Finally, the necessity for the Arab League to intervene in democratic movements. I would like to directly go on to the first clash in this debate. On justification, the government team has told us that the purpose of Arab League was fundamentally an economic arrangement and therefore should not comment on political issues. However, we would like to say that first of all, the situation is urgent. The Arab countries are going backwards in history. They're going backwards in democratic movement, while all the other countries are already democratic and the citizens' rights are all established. And people are being killed, ladies and gentlemen. But the government team is taking no responsibility in this, and they're simply saying that. The document says that the Arab League is about economic arrangements. However, when the situation is urgent, today the opposition team believes that what says on the document is not as important as making the most efforts to get through with the status quo and solve the problems that are going on in the Arab countries. Secondly, the point we would like to emphasize throughout the whole debate is that Arab League is the only regional organization that represents Arab nations, and if Arab League does not speak about the most important issue going on in the Arabic region, who else will? The government team's answer was the United Nations, but as I would like to further explain in my later clashes, this will have adverse effects on the situation. And we believe that today, the government team saying that there is no necessity for the Arab League, there's no justification for the Arab League to speak about the democratic movements, and they're saying that the Arab nations should simply be led to do what they want without a unified goal or action, and we believe that this is simply irresponsible for the government to say this. To move on, and also, they said that rather the UN and other countries can help. However, first of all, we would like to say that our Prime Minister clearly said that the United Nations and Arab League can cooperate, and this will be more effective if Arab League speaks for the democratic movements. And secondly, cooperation with other countries should be minimized as possible because it will be more harmful because they have totally different ideology and interests than with Arab nations. Now I would like to move on to the second clash. No, thank you, sir. The consequence, whether there are more harms or benefits in the intervention of Arab League. Now, the government team had provided us of one harm, which is that it will break the economic relationship and oil treaties. First of all, they have not provided us of sufficient link between the Arab League commenting politically and the economic treaties being broken. And secondly, the Arab League is already contributing to the democratic movements in the Arab nations. Because, for example, they have required the Syrian government to stop the massacre of citizens, and they have also proposed to the UN Council to encourage the Syrian president to step down. However, nothing has been done to the economic treaties and oil treaties of the Arab nations, unlike what the government team is arguing. And finally, we believe that these economic treaties and treaties can only be stable based on political stability. And in order to achieve political stability, we believe that the Arab League must intervene. Now the opposition team has provided you of many harms. First of all, the benefits of the Arab League intervening. First of all, because the Arab nations share the same ideology, religion, and interests among themselves, unlike the Western countries, it would be much better for them to solve the problem internally, because when Western countries intervene, because of the lack of unity because of the lack of regional unity, it will exacerbate the situation, as our speakers have kept on emphasizing. Secondly, this is especially true in the Arabic region because of its specialty. The Middle East countries are especially against foreign intervention on political issues, and we can see this when we see so many terrorist movements going on in the Middle East countries. And that is why, then this is the evidence on which we believe that foreign intervention, especially of the Western countries, will cause even more turbulence in these countries concerning democracy. And finally, from the aspect of the international society, we believe that the Asian problems, the problems are going on in Asia is concerned in ASEAN, and European problems are solved in EU. And therefore, we believe that there's the Middle Eastern issue should be finished within the region. We concede that United Nations may intervene, but only when it is desperate, not from the first place, because we still respect the sovereignty of these Arabic nations. Now, to move on to the final clash, the necessity of the Arab League's intervention. The government team has said that they respect the Arab Spring and the citizens can do it by themselves, and when the situations are desperate, the United Nations can intervene. However, first of all, the people are being massacred by their governments, by their dictators, and the situation is not getting better. And we cannot simply just watch this going on, and as the only regional organization in the Arab regions, Arab League must comment and make the situation get better, as they have done in outcasting the President Gaddafi. They should be continuing to do this in the Syrian problems. Secondly, problems. And we believe that the Arab League is actually making efforts to solve the situation, and they should continue on. Also, the fact that the only regional organization representing the Arab region stands openly for democracy has much significance for the citizens that are fighting for democracy, and we believe that this itself is very important in a region like Arab that is much against democracy. And today, the opposition team had provided you of the needs and the benefits of why the Arab League should continue to comment on the democratic movements in the Middle East, while the government failed to provide enough reasons why it is unnecessary and it is harmful, and therefore we take this debate home. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes 55 seconds. And now, to finish up the opposition case, I would like to call upon the opposition reply.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and honorable adjudicators. Today is the last speaker for the opposition side. We would like to clearly explain how irresponsible the government side today is, and explain why the Arab League should continue to comment on pursuit of democracy in the Middle East, which, in other words, why the opposition side today wins the debate. I'd like to point out 3 points before I go on to summarize each side's arguments and their points. First of all, about the international organization's fundamental purposes and their purpose of existence. We have completely explained thoroughly by mentioning examples of EU, NATO, ASEAN, and many other organizations about the mutual dependency of these member states between the member states and the organization themselves. The organization has the responsibility to protect and support these member states when they're in a problem of conflict and like when they're in such troublesome situations. In response to this, the member states also has the responsibility for the organizations. They have to support and follow what the organization tells them to do. This is a mutual agreement between the organizations and the member states. Therefore, we believe that since Arab League is also a formal or international organization consisting of 22 Arab states, we believe that the international organization, Arab League, which represents the Middle East, has the responsibility today to comment on pursuit of democracy in the Middle East, which is one of the most controversial and one of the most dangerous issues going on in the Middle East. The second point I want to make is, before I go on to the second point, however, the government side is denying the fundamental purpose of the existence of the international organizations. They're saying that we should just be satisfied with the status quo, and the status quo in the Middle East is one of the most volatile and one of the most dangerous ones in the entire world. They're saying we should be satisfied. We must leave the Middle East people to die. We must leave them to be massacred by the government's armies. They're just saying we should be satisfied with the status quo and no further intervention is needed. The second point is that they're very undermining the importance of international relations for every country. Ladies and gentlemen, international relations are not those fragile relations like relation between a friend and a friend. They're very important relations that will affect entire citizens of both countries. Therefore, the government, who is representing all the citizens of the country, has the responsibility to be very careful in determining international relations. International relations won't be just broken all of a sudden, and they won't lead to destruction as the government side proposes, just because they comment on something. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not even a war. It's not even taking an action. It's simply commenting on democracy. It's simply saying their formal stance on this issue. That will lead to destruction between countries. That will lead to the destruction of the whole Arab states. We believe that this argument, their first argument, was a grand assumption. Having said these points, I'd like to summarize the arguments. I'd like to mention why the proposition side's arguments don't stand. First argument, they said the purpose of the Arab League was purely economical. I've rebutted by clearly saying the fact that it is stated clearly in the Arab League Charter that there are 6 purposes that they're going to closely cooperate on, including politics. And this is wrong. And in addition, I've explained that fighting each other will not destroy, international relations are not that volatile as they imagine it to be. The second argument is also invalid because of the same reason. They said the Arab League doesn't have the responsibility and it is impractical. I've explained about the Arab League Charter. The third argument that they provided is that the status quo is good enough and there's no need for intervention. We've also said that there's a contradiction because they said that UN should intervene, that UN would be better to intervene, and then they said that there's no need for intervention. We believe that this argument also doesn't stand. On the other hand, the opposition side has given you with solid arguments, with solid evidence today for argument why the Arab League should continue to comment on pursuit of democracy. Our first argument was the Arab League's regional specialty compared to other organizations like UN, which have lots of countries from various cultural and racial backgrounds. Second argument was that it is a win-win situation for the Arab countries themselves and the international society. The third argument was that if we leave it to the countries themselves without Arab League's intervention, the situation will get worse and worse, eventually leading to foreign intervention, which will be very unbeneficial. Fourth argument was that the comment has its own significance itself. Thank you.
The speaker spoke for 4 minutes. Last but certainly not least, to conclude this debate, I'd like to call upon the government reply.
"22 countries from Arab have been gathered for profit," Mr. and Madam Speaker. And that's the reason why the Arab League still exists, because they pursue their own happiness. That's the exact reason why the Arab League exists. And 22 countries from different ideology came from this organization to pursue their own happiness. That's the first fundamental thing that government and opposition today have to debate on this motion, ladies and gentlemen. Upon that note, as a deputy leader of deputy prime minister and as the last speaker of the government side, I would like to organize this debate. We'll give you three things. First, I'll compare the status quo and the intervention, and secondly, I'll give you the reason why I explain the reason about comparing the harms and benefit, and lastly, we'll give you three questions. So firstly, the government and opposition have mentioned, and government side exactly told you why the status quo, the United Nations and the other organization is still valid, and the opposition tells you why the intervention of the Arab League is still valid. And now I'm going to prove it why the government stands. Firstly, I explained about the Arab Spring. The United Nations and other non-profit organizations and other organizations from other countries still exist, and they have benefited to the Arab Spring, to Arab countries who pursue their own benefit. In this status quo, the government side told you why it is invalid for the opposition to bring up the Arab League to insist about their own pursuit of the democracy because it will give a harm. Secondly, we told you impractical. In our argument, our Prime Minister and I told you the harms of comment. The ideology itself is different. That's the reason why they cannot cooperate to make their own voice, one voice through their Arab League, to bring in representative to the podium and explaining about the pursuit of the democratic society or not. So we told you firstly why the status quo and the United Nations and other organizations is valid. And secondly, I'll compare the harms and benefit. When we implement this motion, when we allow Arab League to actually voice out their own opinion, pursuit of the democracy or not, well, they have just explained you by giving a hypothetical story and would like to answer why that can be justified. Firstly, we told you because there exist 22 different countries who has different ideology, it is really hard for them to voice out just one opinion, which is unanimous decision. That's the reason why we told you the Arab League cannot be valid. It is invalid. According to the opposition argument of the government side, Prime Minister came up to this podium, mentioned about the harms of the comment. That still exists, and that exactly rebuts their own argument. So they fail. And lastly, we told you the nature of Arab League. They have gathered together for their profit. Now, this will bring a side effect because their purpose is not commenting something pursuit of democratic society. That's the reason this is not valid. Second, their ideology is different. And because there exists Arab League, the reason why it still exists in the state society, because there exists a oil, there exists a coal. That's the reason why Arab League is still valid, and they've done a lot of things for those things. But however, they've made a lot of corruption when they made a lot of comment on democratic society, to pursue of the democracy of the Arab League, Arab country. Secondly, because there exists an economic issue, they get it. But if there is an interruption, you think it will be valid? Mr. Madam Speaker, rationally, I think not. Our government side have mentioned a lot, but they are still ignoring the fact, and they've never mentioned about this point, why the different ideology, country can gather together and can actually make a unanimous decision. That's the reason why we cannot agree on the opposition's case. International relation is firm, but however, Arab League is not firm because they have gathered not for their ideology, because of their profit. So I'll give you three questions. Why Arab League has side effects, and why Arab League has no responsibility, why Arab League is impractical. I've answered these three questions. That's the reason why the government policy stands. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 4 minutes, 12 seconds. This marks the end of the EFL Grand Finals. I wish the best of luck to both teams. I would like to say congratulations to both teams for making
between the Arab countries.
As I would like to first representing the
They're just saying we should be satisfied with such.
26 oil.
end of the EFL Grand